Welcome to Health Made Radio with your host, Dr. Michael Karlfeldt of the Karlfeldt Institute on KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM and 580 AM.
Welcome to an hour of Health Made Radio. Health Made is a community for natural health seekers where we educate people about common health conditions and share extensive research on the most effective natural health treatments and promote legislation that protects our health freedoms. A core concept belief is an innate intelligence and healing power of the body, and if properly supported spiritually, emotionally, and nutritionally, it can find its way back to health. Health Made Radio will bring information from integrative health experts throughout the world. Health is what you make it. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt, and I will be your host. Today's guest is attorney Dafna Tachover. Dafna Tachover is the director of 5G Wireless Harms Project of the Children's Health Defense, a nonprofit organization chaired by Robert F. Kennedy Jr., dedicated to eliminating the epidemic of chronic sickness in children from environmental toxins, including wireless radiation. Dafna is also the founder of We Are the Evidence, an advocacy organization for the protection of the rights of the many adults and children who've been injured by wireless technology radiation. Dafna is an attorney in New York and Israel and has a technology background from her service as a telecommunication and computer officer in the Israeli Defense Forces, where she was the commander of the computer center of the military headquarters and operations center. Dafna has been one of the leading advocates on this topic globally and has been working on the federal and state levels, including on 5G. In 2012, Dafna initiated and led a Supreme Court case in Israel to replace the use of Wi-Fi in schools with wired networks, a case that led to the first limitations on Wi-Fi use in schools worldwide. In 2020, under Dafna's direction, Children's Health Defense submitted a historic case against the FCC challenging its wireless RF exposure health guidelines. Dafna, it's such a pleasure to have you on the show again, because we had an initial show where we talked a lot about the EMF and 5G, and one of the components that we obviously is important to address, how to protect ourselves. But first, I mean, why did this become such a passion of yours?
Unfortunately, I'm not one of the smart people. I first had to get sick in order to get smart. So I used to be an avid user, an early adopter of this technology, and one day, no warning signs, it made me very sick, and this is how I got my wake-up call. And after becoming very sick from this, and when I mean sick, I mean it's completely changed my life and make my life to quite impossible. I mean, it's quite impossible to be intolerant to wireless in the wireless world. And, being an attorney, I wanted to understand how come, this technology can harm, that I love so much, can harm me to such an extent. And that's when I started to learn the evidence. And I discovered that unlike what the public is being told, there are thousands of studies that showing the harms of this technology beyond any doubt. And I just couldn't not do something to expose this big lie that harms so many people.
Yeah, and I mean, because right now it seems like the world cannot exist with all this technology. I mean, and obviously at the same time, then we are experiencing more and more chronic diseases, more neurological conditions, autoimmune conditions. I mean, there's fatigue, depression, anxiety. I mean, there's so everything is just getting worse and worse in all these areas. So you feel then that this technology is actually has an impact in all these areas.
Absolutely. It's not, I don't think. I mean, if you read the scientific evidence, it's quite clear. And if you think, I mean, you know better than I how the human body works. We are electric beings. So how can something which is electricity, that in levels which are quintillion times higher, quintillions is 1 and 18 after, higher than what our body evolved to tolerate, cannot affect us. And there are a lot of elements in this technology that make it bioactive, and those elements actually also the elements that we will need to work on to find better ways to use this technology and to make this technology safer for everyone.
And so and I'm curious also, because we grew up, we evolved human beings, we're here on Earth, and we have this, the Earth has a certain electromagnetic field, there's a certain amount of hertz, I think it's like 7.81 or something like that, and that kind of has a grounding effect, and then we have the brain that functions on a certain kind of electrical activity, and we have the cells function with electrical activity, and then also how we transport nutrients and detoxify. All of these things are electrical activities, and even our DNA, the genetics, how they are being produced, are guided by electrical activity. So, do you feel that these things are then impacting all those processes in the body?
Absolutely, and there's very clear evidence. There are, for example, numerous EEG studies that were done not only on animals but also on humans that show that when people are being exposed to this radiation, it changes their brain activity in numerous ways. And exactly what you say, brain is electric, the heart is electric, the nervous system is electric, our cells communicate electrically, so clearly it does have impact. So as I said, we have EEG studies that show it very clearly. We have studies that shows brain scans of people's brains, and it shows that it affects the brain activity. There was a very famous story of firefighters who got injured after a cell tower was installed in their station, and brain scans showed that what it caused their neurons to fire nonstop without overexcitability of the nervous system activity. So we have a lot of studies that show clearly the effect, and it's not maybe it's studies in humans, it's studies with with different technologies that show the effect, and you cannot doubt or dispute what you see in those brain scans, in those EEGs. So clearly it is affecting those systems, and without a doubt, I think wireless radiation is, if not the cause to a lot of the sickness that we're seeing right now, it's definitely a major contributory factor. And again, the evidence exists, whether it's cancer, whether it's reproductive harms, whether it's neurological problems like microwave sickness, which is the condition I suffer from. And essentially anyone who experiences various symptoms when they expose to radiation suffers from this condition. ADHD, it's probably a contributing factor in autism. Furthermore, we also see the opposite. We see that once people realize that it might be that this technology is adversely affecting their health, once they remove those devices or the exposure to this radiation, at least in their homes, they and their children are becoming better. I know numerous families who had children with ADHD diagnosis, and once they remove all wireless devices from their homes, those children, the children's diagnosis was removed. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and that's, I know I had interviewed an expert about the screen time, where an individual or a child is in front of the screen, and especially now when we are dealing with this so-called pandemic or plandemic, or what you want to call it, and people are doing more distant learning, and they are working more from their computers. So now you're continually in front of the screen, and you're continually around this field, and obviously that is really impacting our children. And she did like a 30-day detoxification program, which meant that you pretty much stayed away from any kind of screen for 30 days. And it was a dramatic difference in these children, whether it had autism, ADHD, depression, anxiety. It was really tremendous.
Well, I have a little bit of an issue with the screen time studies. I think those screen time studies do not take into consideration the fact that those screens emit radiation, and it might be that it's the radiation that's causing the effect rather than the screen time, which I think, again, the radiation is the more likely explanation to those effects. So I really don't think it's a screen time. I think it's the radiation emitted from the screen time that is causing the effect, and that's why when you reduce exposure, you also see improvement in the children.
Exactly. And so when you're dealing with, so we have the EMF microwave, now we got the 5G that's coming out. I mean, what are some of the kind of big, what are some kind of classifications of electromagnetic assaults or radiation assaults that we're dealing with that we should be aware of?
I'm not completely sure I understand the question. We are we are exposed to electromagnetic fields and radiation. Maybe we should explain what it is first.
Yes, please.
So everyone would understand the words and can follow up the conversation. So essentially when we see light or when we use a cell phone, what it is, it's information that is being transferred over waves. Another word for wave is frequency. We don't see them, but they're all around us. And the difference between the frequency of the light to frequency of a cell phone will be how many oscillations per second that frequency has, and that is measured in units which are called hertz. So 1 hertz would be 1 oscillation per second. A frequency of 60 hertz would be 60 oscillations per second, and that's the frequency we use for house electricity. And in comparison, for example, Wi-Fi, it's a frequency of 2,450,000,000 hertz. That means 2,450,000,000 hertz oscillations per second. And they are called, all this frequency called electromagnetic frequencies because they have electric fields and magnetic fields. And when we get to the higher frequencies, like the frequencies we use for wireless technology, which are called radio frequencies or microwave frequencies, the interaction between the electric field and the magnetic field is causing energy. Another word for energy is radiation. And so when we are talking about devices that may affect our health, we're talking first of devices that emit radiation or wireless radiation, which are devices like cell phones, Wi-Fi, or anything that right now they call smart. So smart TV means that it has a Wi-Fi transmitting antenna that emits radiation. If you have a smart refrigerator, the same thing. Sadly, they even have smart diapers that text the mother whenever the baby poops, and not a very dumb idea to radiate your child with microwave radiation. And it is, maybe I'll use this opportunity to say that, the radiation from microwave oven is microwave radiation, just like one coming out of your Wi-Fi. And in fact, the same frequency that is used for Wi-Fi is the same frequency used for the microwave oven, the 2.45 gigahertz, which means 2,450,000,000 hertz. So all of these devices emit radiation, all the wireless devices. Other devices, electric devices that do not have transmitting antennas, can be also harmful to our health because the electric and magnetic fields also have adverse impacts. And again, it's not a surprise considering we are electric being. A lot of systems in our body work on low frequencies and emit electric field and magnetic field. And if we introduce outside exposure, they're going to be interference. Just like, outside devices can interfere with other electronic devices, they also interfere with our body, which is an electronic device. So all of these devices have effects on our body, but the problem with the wireless devices is we don't only use the frequency, they also have to carry data. So that frequency has to carry the text that you send, the words that you say, the music that you're downloading. And the way we put that information over that wave, which we call them a carrier wave, it's called pulsation and modulation, which essentially means we're putting more frequencies under that one big frequency. And that is actually causing most of the that's caused most of the adverse effects in our body. That is the most bioactive element of this technology, because now you have something with very high variability, and our nervous system is more sensitive to things that have variability. An example would be fluorescent lights, right? So some people can get epileptic seizures from fluorescent lights, and the reason is because those fluorescent lights are flickering. And things that flicker, that are not constant, are changing, are more difficult for our nervous system. Same with wireless technology. The pulsation and the modulation of those frequencies in order to carry the data is bioactive and adversely affecting our body. So because of the need to carry this information. And this is why wireless technology in many ways causing more people to become sick than just exposure to regular electronic devices.
That's fascinating. We're going to take a quick break. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm here with Dafna Tachover, and we're discussing the impact of EMA and microwave radiation on our health. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Health Made Radio with your host, Dr. Michael Karlfeldt.
Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm here with Dafna Tachover, and we're talking about the dangerous technology. Even though very useful, it's still impacting our health. Electromagnetic frequencies and 5G radiation and other types of radiation. So. And I thought, Dafna, that was extremely an important point for people to understand, is that we have the normal waves, and the body, when it's just a consistent waves that the body gets used to, then it can adjust and compensate. But then, like you're saying, when we are adding data, like the song or text or voice, when we're calling or whatever it may be, onto that wave, it becomes so unpredictable for the body, so it feels like it's continually being put under stress and then impacting the communication within itself. That is then creating a large confusion. So when it's confused, obviously it can't defend itself against microorganisms. So if you're dealing with a virus or attacked by a virus, you're going to be able to defend yourself against it, or your immune system is not going to be smart, and your hormonal system is not going to be able to function properly. Your thyroid hormone is not going to know where to go and which cells to activate. So now you have issues with that. So it seems like it just becomes a huge domino effect just because you're creating this confusion or this assault on the body.
That is correct, and I think it's worthwhile mentioning how ridiculous the denial of the effect is, considering we're actually using electromagnetic field and radiation in medical treatment. And what makes them bioactive, it's actually the pulsing of that frequency, and this is and basically that is make that signal more bioactive. And this is what we do with wireless technology. We pulsing and modulating the signal, so in order to carry the data. And so there's no surprise. It's not a surprise that there are bioeffects, and not only it's not a surprise, it's ridiculous to claim that there are not.
And they've actually seen then, for instance, you have men that walks around with their cell phone in their pocket, how that then creates genetic changes, within the sperm, which means that obviously, if you are wanting to have children, you can actually, you may not be able to then transfer the genetic material that's been kind of passed down from generation to generation to your baby, because the cell phone has actually altered the genetic material.
Right, and there is scientific evidence that once there is damage to the DNA of the sperm, you cannot, it's not repairable. So the damage, as you said, goes for generation. But you also affect, your ability to have children in the future. And studies that were done on mice show that within the sixth generation, they could not have children anymore. And if you look at the data, it's pretty clear in regard to the reproductive effects, especially on the sperm. And we see it in data, and we see it on the ground with the increasing rates of families, couples that cannot have children. And also we see the problems, the health problem children are having. I mean, children now, I think 54% of children have some kind of a chronic disease. I mean, half of the children are sick. It's just, there is a reason why, and this is likely why. And it's also important to say that it's not only the cell phone, it's the iPad, it's the laptop that people are using, and they're putting them on the laps near the reproductive organs. And even if you keep a little bit more distant, they still have a significant effect on the reproductive organs. And this is, when probably we're going to go to the next stage where we need to understand that we can do everything we do with these devices without the radiation. There are safer ways to use this technology without causing all this harm.
Yeah, and actually, let's take a little quick break now so that we can then move into what do we need to do? How can we protect ourselves? What are there expensive devices, or what do we need to do? We'll take a quick break. You're listening to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dafna Tachover. Be right back.
Now, back to Health Made Radio with your host, Dr. Michael Karlfeldt.
Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dafna Tachover, and we're discussing technology and the impact it has on our health and what we can do to protect ourselves. So we're talking about then the horrendous negative impact that these pulses, when you have waves with data that's flowing and we are kind of embedded. It's like a sea of information that we are embedded in, and we're impacted by it in so many different ways, creating confusion, neurological, electrical, cell differentiation, confusion. So what are the biggest threats, or should I say, what are some of the best things that a person can do to identify the threat, and then also being able to minimize it, so that they can stay as healthy for as long as possible?
So I think it's really important to understand that now the environmental exposure, it's growing, especially with the deployment of 5G, that when we are being forced with hundreds of thousands more cell towers in closer proximity to our homes. And until we'll be able to win this battle against the government and that radiation that is being forced on us, the one place in which people can have some control is their home. And I think for people to take action, they first need to understand that and believe that this is a serious threat to their health. And so I think my first advice to people is go and read and learn and understand the extent of the harms and the evidence of the harms of this technology. Because I think that this change in the way we live, like moving away from wireless technology, is something that requires some kind of a effort and some kind of a decision. But for you to be able to be persistent with your decision to reduce your exposure and take measures to change the way you do things, require a strong understanding that this is something you probably need to do. And I do think we need to do that. I mean, people don't give cigarettes to their children. Giving their child a cell phone or an iPad and allow them to be exposed to this radiation is so much worse. It's exponentially worse. The second thing I recommend people to do is to get a meter. There are meters to measure this radiation, and it's important because this radiation is invisible. When you talk about cigarettes, you can see the smoke, you can smell. But when it comes to this radiation, you don't see the radiation, you cannot smell it. Some people can hear it, and if you have ringing in your ears or tinnitus, most likely actually what you're hearing is the radio frequencies from wireless technology. And some people can feel it or consciously feel it, but most people cannot. And so it is important that you get a meter and you start to understand what it is that is affecting you. So those meters, some of them, all of them, most of them have, the numbers. So you can see the levels of radiation. You can see some of them have a sound element, so you can actually hear the radiation. And actually, people say that this is the most convincing way for them, because once you hear the radiation, you cannot unhear it. So that's very important to have that feature on your meter. Some have lights and have graphs, so it's really important to make the invisible visible. And it's important for people to start using that meter and go in their home and see the different devices and see how much radiation they emit. And they can actually also see the pulsation and how the radiation changes all the time. And so that makes it real and can help them also make decision and understand what is it that affecting them, where is most of the radiation coming from. So this is the first step. And there are different meters.
What kind of meter, what are they called? So if a person is going to look it up on, like Amazon and to get one, what search word should they use?
So the words will be RF, radio frequency, which is the frequency we use for WAS, RF meter. And I do recommend, there are two types that I recommend. One is known as acoustic meter. It's a bit bigger, it's more expensive, but it has a great sound, and it's very accurate. The second meter I recommend, which is the one I mostly use, it's called Cornet. And the specific, the different ones, the specific one I'm using is Cornet ED, like the name Ed, the number 88, T plus. And this is a bit cheaper than acoustimeter, and it also gives you a little bit more information. It does have sound, but not as good as the acoustic meter. The acoustic meter is about $400. The Cornet is about $170. I do have a request, though, that people would not buy it from Amazon. Amazon is part of the problem.
Thank you.
On the other hand, there are a lot of people who are work really hard on advocacy on this issue, and some of them have companies that a side business or store that they send those meters, and I hope people will take that little effort and do that. Usually they'll get their meter as fast, and they also get an explanation and people that will help them. For example, you can get those meters from stopsmartmeters.org. This is an organization that works very hard to give us opt-out from smart meters, and we'll talk about that in a second. But there are a lot of other organizations out there. Just, search a little bit and you're going to get to them. And so these are the RF meter. I really think it's crucial for people to get it, because without it, it's really difficult to understand and relate and assess your environment. Now, if you ask me after you got that meter, what is the next thing you should do? We talked about smart meters, and so my advice would be call your utility company and ask to opt out from your smart meter. What is a smart meter? Smart meter is a utility meter. They have utility meters for electricity, for water, and for gas. The worst one is the utility meter for the electricity. And what they did a few years ago, they started to change the old analog meters that we have, those with that rotating plate, and change it into wireless meters that constantly send message to your electric company how much electricity you used. The problem with this meter, not only they send non-stop pulsing, and as we said, pulsing is bad. Some of them send about 190,000 pulses a day in very high levels of radiation. They also put wireless frequencies into our house electricity, and that is causing a lot of people to become sick. And I know more people who became sick from smart meters than from anything else. And so if you started having headaches, you don't know why, and other symptoms, cognitive problems, start having irritability, anxiousness, heart palpitation, sleep problems, tinnitus or ringing in the ears, nosebleeds, very likely that you have a smart meter on your home. So a lot of advocates work really hard to get opt-out. There's opt-out in most states around the country. The best way to check the situation is to go to an organization called, again, stopsmartmeters.org. They have a list of the states and the situation and how you can get an opt-out. So that is hugely important, especially when it comes to the electric meter. One more point I want to make is do not buy meter shield. Some companies sell a shield that you can put around your meter. What it means is they put a metal shield around the meter, and metal is the reason they put a metal shield is because metal blocks radiation. And what you do when you do that, essentially you block the antenna from being able to connect with the cell tower. So the smart meter is going to actually emit more radiation because it will try harder to connect with the antenna, and therefore will put even higher levels of radiation into your house and your electric system. So do not buy those guards to the smart meters. Just call your company and get an opt-out. So that's number one item on the list. The next thing I would do is turn off the Wi-Fi router at home, especially at night. And so first I should say it's not really Wi-Fi router, it's internet router. Those routers that we get, that whenever we get a subscription to the internet, we get a router. And that router, its job is to spread internet, not to spread wireless, but to spread internet. And it spread internet in your house in two ways. One is because it has wireless transmitting antennas, and it sends Wi-Fi signal in your house. So basically, you can connect to the internet wirelessly. So Wi-Fi means connecting to the internet wirelessly. Wi-Fi is not internet. Wi-Fi is a way to connect to the internet wirelessly. However, that router in your house also have ports in the back, and you can connect with an Ethernet cable to that port in the back of your router and have internet without having the radiation. And when you do that, you actually need to disable the Wi-Fi in the router. But I'll go backward a few steps. It is important to turn the Wi-Fi router at least at night, and it's very easy. All you have to do is just unplug it. And it is crucial because Wi-Fi has very complex modulation, meaning it has even higher variability and it's constantly changing and jumping between frequencies. And as we said, that is very bioactive. Furthermore, and we see it with, especially with cognitive problems and sleeping. Furthermore, the Wi-Fi also emits a frequency that interfere with the brain waves, especially with the alpha brain waves. It emits a frequency that is called the beacon frequency. Usually it's a 10 hertz frequency. Our alpha brain waves work between 8 to 13 frequencies. And if you have two frequencies, two transmitting devices working on the same frequencies, usually there's interference. And if the Wi-Fi router sends a 10 hertz frequency and your brain works on 10 hertz frequencies, they're likely going to be interference. But the other frequencies are interfering with the wave, your brain work as well. Furthermore, so if you cannot, if this is interfering with your brain wave, then you're not going to sleep well. If you're not going to sleep well, you're not going to produce enough melatonin in your body. And again, you cannot sleep well, you don't produce enough melatonin, and your body cannot correct the damage that was caused from this exposure during the day. Furthermore, there is evidence that this radiation, including Wi-Fi, is reducing melatonin production in our body. And there's actually a very interesting study that was done and showed that if you give people melatonin the night before exposure to wireless radiation, there is no DNA damage from this radiation. And so if you do not produce enough melatonin because of exposure to this radiation, you cannot even correct the damage that was caused to you from this radiation. So crucial when you go to sleep to turn off all your wireless devices, including your router, including your cell phone, including any other wireless emitting device. It's really crucial for the ability of your body to deal with this radiation. Now, the next stage is not only to turn off the Wi-Fi in your house at night, it's also to turn it off during the day, and instead of using the internet wirelessly, connect to the internet with Ethernet cable, as we mentioned. And this is especially important now with the COVID and the remote learning. And the Children's Health Defense, which is the organization I work with, published guidelines on how to do remote learning safe and how to wire all the devices so your children can do all the schoolwork and without being exposed to this radiation that is seriously harming them. And not only it's safer to their health, it's actually faster. You get faster internet with wired internet, and so it's actually better for them in every way. So it is crucial to hardwire your devices, and you can hardwire all your devices. You can hardwire the iPad, you can hardwire the laptop, you can even hardwire your cell phone and use it on airplane mode. So are you still there, Michael?
Yes, I'm still here. This is such incredible information. Actually, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Health Made Radio, and we're going through information that can, literally save your life. We'll be right back.
Now, back to Health Made Radio with your host, Dr. Michael Karlfeldt.
Welcome back to Health Made Radio. I'm Dr. Michael Karlfeldt. I'm here with Dafna Tachover. We're just going through solutions that you can utilize to minimize the impact of radiation that you're exposed to that can have so many negative health impacts. And one of the things, you're talking about the importance of, the first step, making sure that you protect yourself from this radiation from the Wi-Fi at night. And so what happens at night is that is when the brain detoxifies, that's when the body detoxifies, and that's when tissue regenerates and repairs. And so if you interfere with that process, which easily happens when you're exposed to this radiation, your brain is going to be toxic, it's going to be inflamed, and the toxic brain, obviously you have buildup of heavy metals, chemicals, and then we know heavy metals in themselves, they make radiation transmittable much more easily, so which means that you are going to have more brain interference, which is going to put you more at a space where you're dealing with anxious, depression, brain fog, and everything that goes along with a brain not functioning properly. And then also you are not going to regenerate. You have the DNA damage that Dafna was talking about. And what kind of diseases are we looking at with DNA damage? Well, we got cancer. Here we are looking at a cancer epidemic where, soon we'll probably be 1 out of 2 that will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lives. So, these are life-saving steps that Dafna is talking about, and so please continue. So we and hardwiring. That's such a simple solution, and you get better connection with it. You get better service.
Yes, you do, and I understand people don't like the cables, but I think that going to a doctor and getting sick it's much worse. However, you can actually hardwire your whole house and have Ethernet ports in numerous locations around the house. And this is, for example, something we did for Robert Kennedy's home. We hardwired the whole house, and everywhere in his house there's ports to connect to the Ethernet. If this is, and it's not very expensive, but if it is, they're actually simpler solutions, which I do not recommend, but they're still better than using Wi-Fi. So there is, you can actually have a plug-in in your electric socket that basically is going to transfer the internet over the power line in your house. So it connects to the router. Let's say your router is in the living room, but your bedroom is really far away and you want to have internet in your bedroom. Then you plug that socket into the plug-in into the socket, which is connected to the router, and then you put the other plug-in in your bedroom, and you're going to get internet there. The problem with these plug-ins are that they are creating dirty electricity. Again, they put frequencies under the power lines, and that's creating dirty electricity, which is also harmful. And the way to manage this, and this is anyway something I recommend people to do in their home, there's something called a home filter. And that cleans the electricity in your house between the smart meters in your neighborhood, the use of your neighbors of wireless devices, people's use of solar panels. A lot of frequencies are getting into our electric systems that should not be there, including wireless frequencies. And those whole house filters clean that the electric frequency from all of those bad frequencies. And that may have huge impact on people's health. And so if you are using those plugins, you do want to get a house filter. You usually will need also an electrician or a building biologist to install them. But again, it's definitely worth the money, not only to protect you from the wireless devices, but also some other problem with your electric system. So these are the ways to plug in. And again, getting hardwired is easy, but it is important to remember that it's not only important to plug into the router with an Ethernet cable. You also have to turn off the Wi-Fi in your router. You're still going to have internet from the router, but only in the ports, not wireless. And again, in that document that we have on the Children's Health Defense website, it explains how to disable the wireless in the router. And you can also contact your internet provider and ask them how to do it. Don't tell them to do it. Ask them to explain you how to do it so you have control over it. And it really takes a few seconds to enable or disable the Wi-Fi on your router. And even if you are deciding to use Wi-Fi, you can still turn it off when you're not using it. Again, you go to the setting of your router through your computer or through your cell phone, and then you disable the Wi-Fi in your house. And this is crucial because, as I said, Wi-Fi has really massive adverse effects because of its complex modulations. And if you don't believe me, just go online and search for patent from Swisscom. Swisscom is government-owned wireless company in Switzerland. In fact, it's their only wireless company. And they filed a patent in 2003 in the United States admitting that those Wi-Fi routers are causing DNA damage, may cause cancer, and other adverse effects. And they actually developed, allegedly, a router that will be healthier, and that's why they submitted the patent. So even the industry, when people don't know, is admitting this is very harmful. So please, that Wi-Fi router is not your friend. And many times I'm asking people, hey, would you put your child in front of a microwave oven all day? I say, oh, no, of course not. Well, the radiation coming from that Wi-Fi router is just as bad. It's the same frequency as the one coming from the microwave oven. It's actually the same level.
Kevin Miller mornings, Sean Hannity afternoons. KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, KIDO Nampa, Fox News Now.